In this next section, we're going to be talking about bias. Studies can be biased or unbiased. Imagine that you were to draw a simple random sample of students to estimate the percentage who are Democrats. By chance, your sample would probably contain a somewhat larger or smaller proportion of Democrats than the entire population of students. However, imagine drawing many simple random samples. Some would have too many, and some would have too few, but on the average, they would balance out. On the average, the percentage of Democrats in a simple random sample would be the same as in the population. A study conducted by a procedure that produces the correct result on the average is said to be unbiased. Now imagine that you tried to estimate the percentage of Democrats in the population by selecting students who attended a speech made by a Democratic politician. On the average, studies conducted in this way would overestimate the percentage of Democrats in the population. Studies conducted with methods that tend to overestimate or underestimate the true value are said to be biased. So let's identify the sources of bias. Voluntary response bias. A voluntary response survey is one in which people are invited to log into a website, send a text message, tweet, or call a phone number in order to express their opinion on an issue. In many cases, the opinions of the people who choose to participate in these surveys do not reflect the population as a whole. In particular, people with strong opinions are more likely to participate. In general, voluntary response surveys are highly biased. Like we talked about before, not only is it people's strong opinions, a lot of times it's the strong negative opinions that want to fill out that survey. Self-interest. Many advertisements contain data that claim to show that the product being advertised is superior to its competitors. The advertiser, however, may not report any data that tends to show that the product is inferior. People who have an interest in the outcome of an experience have an incentive to use biased methods. So they're looking out for their self-interest. They don't want you to think that they're inferior. They want you to think they're superior. So they are definitely going to be using biased methods to reach that. Social acceptability. People may be reluctant to admit to behavior that may reflect negatively on them, which affects many surveys. For example, a pollster may ask, did you vote in the last presidential election? The problem with this direct approach is that people are reluctant to answer no because they're concerned that not voting is socially less acceptable than voting. The next type of bias. Sometimes questions are worded in a way that suggest a particular response. So it could be the question itself. Consider these questions. Do you favor decreasing the heavy tax burden on middle-class families? What is your opinion on decreasing taxes for middle-class families? Choices are strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, neither agree or disagree, somewhat agree, strongly agree. The first question, look at the wording, heavy, burden. uses wording to encourage a yes response. Heavy tax burden. Non-response bias. People cannot be forced to answer questions or to participate in a study. In a study, a certain proportion of people who are asked to participate refuse to do so. These people are called non-responders. In many cases, the opinions of non-responders tend to differ from the opinions of those who do respond, those who volunteered their response. As a result, surveys with many non-responders are often biased. I have a little bit of a typo here too. My goodness. Sampling bias occurs when some members of the population are more likely to be included than others. One example of that is sample of convenience. Now, I just realized this was a duplicate after that. Sometimes consumer surveys are conducted by randomly calling people from a list of residential phone numbers. Sampling bias is likely to occur in such a survey because consumers without a residential phone will be omitted from the sample. So notice that would definitely be a sample bias.